Part 1. The Cage. I didn't know I was in New York City, 2023. Olivia Carter, 29 years old. For the longest time, I thought love was supposed to feel like this. Like holding my breath. Like walking on eggshells. Like waiting for the storm that always came, even when the sky looked clear. Ryan had a way of making me believe I was the problem. Every snide remark, every cold shoulder, every time he forgot to tell me about plans until the last minute, somehow, it was my fault. I was too sensitive, too emotional, too demanding. And when he did something thoughtful, like bringing home my favorite coffee, I clung to it like a starving woman, convincing myself it was proof he loved me. That's what it had been like for the past 5 years. A slow erosion of who I was, until I barely recognized the woman in the mirror. I used to be fearless. I used to have dreams, starting my own design firm, traveling the world, laughing without fear of being told I was too loud. But with Ryan, my world had shrunk down to his expectations. His needs. His temper. And worst of all, his money. Or at least, what I thought was his. Ryan was an investor, always talking about big deals and long-term gains in a way that made me feel stupid for not understanding. He handled everything, the bills, our accounts, the rent for our high-rise apartment in Manhattan. It was easier that way, he said, because he was better at finances. He made me believe I should be grateful that he took care of me. But deep down, I knew something was wrong. I had a good job. A great job, actually. I worked as a senior designer at an interior architecture firm, making well over 6 figures. Yet, somehow, I never had money. Ryan always had a reason for why my paycheck never lasted: investments, shared expenses, unexpected costs. He told me I was bad with money, and I believed him. Until the day I didn't. It started with a receipt. A small thing, really, but looking back, I think that's when the cracks in my reality became impossible to ignore. I had been digging through our desk drawer, looking for my passport, when I found an old bank statement. The account wasn't one I recognized. The balance? Over $370,000. My stomach dropped. I scanned the document again, my eyes catching a name at the top: Ryan A. Carter. My last name. My identity. But I had never opened an account like this. My hands trembled as I flipped through the other papers in the drawer. More statements. More transfers. More of my money. At first, I couldn't make sense of it. But then, I saw the deposits. My salary. My bonuses. My freelance projects. All funneling into this account I had never seen before. Ryan had been stealing from me. For years. I sat there, heart pounding so hard I thought I might pass out. This wasn't just about money. This was about control. About power. About the man I had trusted with my life, using me as his personal ATM while keeping me financially dependent on him. I felt sick. But the worst part? I wasn't surprised. Somewhere deep inside, I had always known Ryan was keeping something from me. I just never thought he was robbing me blind. That night, I barely spoke to him. I couldn't. If I opened my mouth, I wasn't sure what would come out. Rage? Tears? A confession that I knew everything? Ryan didn't notice. He was too busy gloating about some new business deal. Something big. Something that was going to change everything. I sat across from him at dinner, watching him talk about his brilliant investment move, and I realized something terrifying. That money? It wasn't just sitting in a secret account. He was using it. For his deals. His career. His reputation. And if I didn't act fast, it would be gone forever. That was the moment the fear cracked, just a little. Beneath it, something sharper stirred. Anger. I wasn't going to let him win. That night, when Ryan was asleep, I did something I had never dared before. I snooped. It wasn't hard. Ryan was arrogant. He never expected me to be smart enough to suspect anything, let alone look. His laptop was unlocked, his emails wide open. Within minutes, I had everything I needed: bank transfers, business contracts, proof of stolen money. I copied everything onto a flash drive, my hands shaking. The more I found, the more disgusted I became. Ryan hadn't just taken my money. He had built his entire career on it. His upcoming deal? The one he was bragging about? It was his biggest yet, a multi-million-dollar real estate venture that would launch him into the kind of power he had always craved. And the best part? If word got out that he had stolen funds to finance it, the whole thing would crumble. For the first time in years, I felt something I hadn't in a long time. Control. Ryan thought he owned me. He thought I would never leave. But he was wrong. I wasn't just going to walk away. I was going to take back what was mine. And when I was done, Ryan Carter wouldn't just lose me. He'd lose everything. I didn't sleep that night. I sat in the dark, staring at the flash drive on my desk, my heart pounding like a war drum. Every nerve in my body screamed at me to run, but I knew better. If I panicked, I'd lose. If I left without a plan, Ryan would come after me, and I'd be walking straight into his trap. No, I had to be smart. I had to hit him where it hurt: his money, his power, his ego. By morning, I had my plan. I had spent years believing Ryan was smarter than me, stronger than me. That was his greatest trick, convincing me I needed him, that I'd be nothing without him. But as I sat there with proof of his crimes in my hands, I realized something terrifying. I had let him control me for years, and now that I was ready to break free, I wasn't just going to leave. I was going to take everything back. I played my part that morning. I kissed Ryan on the cheek like nothing was wrong. I smiled at him over coffee, listened to him brag about the big real estate deal that would change his life. I even laughed when he made a joke about how I wouldn't understand high-level finances. Then, as soon as he left, I moved. I packed light, just a suitcase of essentials, my laptop, the flash drive. I left my engagement ring on the bathroom counter, a silent middle finger to the years of manipulation. Then I grabbed my phone and called the only person I knew I could trust. Liv? It's 7 a.m, Paige mumbled groggily. I need your help. 15 minutes later, she was outside my building in her beat-up Honda Civic. Her blonde hair was a mess, her eyes still heavy with sleep, but when I slid into the passenger seat, she took one look at my face and nodded. Tell me what we're doing. Ryan had stolen from me, but he hadn't just hoarded the money in a hidden account. He had used it to invest, to fund his business ventures, to secure his future. And now, his biggest deal yet was hanging in the balance, fueled by my stolen money. If I didn't act fast, it would be gone forever. We drove straight to the downtown Chase Bank, and I walked inside with my head held high, pretending I belonged there. My heart pounded as I stepped up to the counter, clutching the printed bank statement in my hand. Hi, I need to make a transfer, I said smoothly. The woman behind the counter barely looked at me as she pulled up the account. She had no idea that my entire life was hanging in the balance, that if she hesitated, if she called Ryan, everything would fall apart. Would you like to transfer the full amount? She asked. I swallowed hard. Yes. She typed something into the computer, and just like that, the numbers on the screen changed. My money was back where it belonged. But I wasn't done. I leaned in, lowering my voice. I need to report suspicious activity on this account. I believe my fiancé has been making unauthorized transactions. The bank teller frowned. Ma'am? I slid the printed documents across the counter, the forged signatures, the fraudulent transfers, the proof of his deception. Her eyes scanned the papers, and for the first time, she hesitated. Then, she gave me a tight nod. "I'll notify the fraud department immediately." I exhaled slowly as I turned and walked out of the bank. The second I stepped outside, I let out a breathless, manic laugh. Paige was waiting for me in the car, gripping the steering wheel. "Did you do it?" I nodded. I just set his entire world on fire. We celebrated with gas station coffee, parked in an empty lot, my hands still shaking. Paige stared at me like I had just pulled off the greatest heist of the century. "Liv," she whispered, "that was insane." I grinned, feeling the first rush of freedom in years. It was never his to begin with. I should have felt safe. Relieved. Free. But I wasn't. Because I knew Ryan. And I knew that when he found out what I had done, he'd come for me. I wasn't going to give him the chance. I bought a burner phone and shut off my old one. I withdrew cash from the ATM and wiped my laptop clean, deleting every trace of my past life. Then, without looking back, I drove out of the city, leaving behind the prison I had lived in for the past 5 years. For 3 weeks, I was a ghost. New name, new city, paying in cash, living in cheap motels. Every time I saw a man in a suit, my stomach twisted. Every time a car slowed down near me, my pulse spiked. I told myself Ryan wouldn't find me, that he had bigger problems to deal with. But deep down, I knew better. Then, one morning, I woke up to a news alert that made my stomach drop. Ryan Carter under investigation for fraud, business deal collapses. I nearly dropped my coffee as I scanned the article. The bank had flagged his accounts. Investors had pulled out. His entire career was crumbling. I should have felt victorious. I had done what I set out to do. I had taken my money back, exposed his crimes, and watched from a distance as his empire burned. But something wasn't right. Because at the very bottom of the article, buried beneath the headlines, was a single chilling sentence: "Sources say Carter has left New York. His current whereabouts are unknown." I gripped the edge of the table, my blood turning to ice. Ryan was looking for me. And the game wasn't over yet. I should have run farther. That was my first thought when I saw the familiar black Audi parked outside the motel. For 3 weeks, I had been careful. I changed locations, used cash, stayed off the grid. But Ryan had money, connections, and a level of obsession I had clearly underestimated. And now he was here. I ducked behind the curtains, my heart slamming against my ribs. My mind raced through escape routes, but there was no back door, no way out except through the front. The only weapon I had was a cheap lamp and my own fear, and I wasn't naive enough to think that would be enough to stop Ryan Carter. Then my phone buzzed. "Unknown number, come outside, Liv. Let's talk." My stomach twisted. I could feel the power in those words, the quiet arrogance of a man who thought he had already won. And maybe, for a second, I believed he had. Because I knew exactly how this would play out. If I ran, he'd follow. If I refused, he'd break down the door. Ryan didn't like losing. And he sure as hell didn't like being outsmarted. I had one shot. One chance to end this on my terms. So I took a breath, slid the flash drive into my pocket, and walked outside. Ryan was leaning against his car like he had all the time in the world, dressed in one of his expensive suits, completely unfazed by the fact that his entire life was crumbling around him. He looked me up and down, then smirked. "You look good for someone who's been hiding in motels." I didn't flinch. "You look calm for someone who's about to lose everything." His jaw tightened for a split second. Then the smirk was back. "Oh, sweetheart." He took a step closer. "You really think this is over?" I forced myself to hold my ground. "I don't think anything, Ryan." "I know." He exhaled slowly, shaking his head like I was some stubborn child who just didn't get it. You had your fun. You embarrassed me, took my money, our money, by the way, but here's the thing, Liv. You didn't finish the job. A cold wave of dread swept over me. His voice dropped lower. You might have ruined that deal, but you didn't ruin me. I swallowed hard. You're under investigation. He chuckled, running a hand through his hair. Yeah? And how long do you think that'll last? A few months? A year? You think men like me actually go to jail? I hated how calm he was. Hated how easy it was for him to act like this was just another minor inconvenience. I needed to hit him where it hurt. So I pulled out my phone. I still have the evidence, I said, my voice steady. The fraud, the offshore accounts, the shell companies you set up in my name. One click, Ryan. That's all it takes for this to go from an investigation to federal charges. For the first time, his smirk faltered. I pressed forward. I already sent copies to my lawyer, just in case something happens to me. And trust me, if I go missing, you'll be the first person they come for. The silence between us stretched long and thin. The weight of my words hung in the air. And then, for the first time in years, I saw it. Fear. Ryan was scared. Not because of the money. Not because of the deal. Because I wasn't afraid of him anymore. And that? That was something he couldn't control. His nostrils flared, his fists clenching at his sides. But he was stuck, and he knew it. After what felt like an eternity, he exhaled sharply. You're making a mistake, Liv. No, I said, voice steady. I'm fixing one. I turned around and walked away, my pulse pounding with every step. I expected him to grab me, to throw one last threat my way. But he didn't. Because he had already lost. I left the motel that night, but I didn't disappear. Not anymore. Instead, I went home. Not to the apartment I had shared with Ryan, but to a new place, one I had picked, one that was mine. The first night there, I sat on the floor of my empty living room with a cheap bottle of wine and let myself breathe. Really, truly breathe. For the first time in years, there was no weight on my chest. No second-guessing every decision. No fear of whether or not my choices would make him angry. Just me. Alive. Free. A week later, the news broke. Ryan Carter, the golden boy of finance, was officially being charged with fraud. His investors had turned on him. His assets were frozen. His empire had turned to dust. And me? I was just getting started. I went back to work, started freelancing again, and for the first time in years, I was in control of my own future. I didn't need Ryan's approval, his money, or his name to be worth something. I was enough. And if he ever came looking for me again, I'd be ready. The end. And there it is. A satisfying, empowering ending that closes the loop on Olivia's journey while leaving readers with something to think about. What would you have done in Olivia's place? Would you have risked everything for revenge, or would you have just disappeared? Let's talk about it.